Hello, all, and welcome to Essence of Wonder. We're happy to have you here as always. Today, we have two very exciting guests. But before we'll get to that, Karen, thank you for joining me again today.
Hey, Gotti, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. This is a new scenario scene setting behind you, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I'm off in California right now, living my artist warehouse dreams.
Do I want to know? What does that mean? I want to know.
It means, I guess I can't give as long as I don't give out the address, I'm sure it's fine. No, we're living in an old auto shop with a bunch of artist friends who build physical installations, and we sort of retrofitted it into a really chaotic living environment.
You're in an art commune and you're about to be evacuated out of there by the police anytime now. That's what you're saying?
No, that actually happened a few weeks ago.
Okay. Well, on that note,
remember when I was telling you I was busy in real life and I couldn't answer for a moment? Yeah, that was that.
I took major offense at that. How dare you? How dare you be
did,
busy
I
with your life?
remember.
Yeah. Anyway, we have two amazing guests today. We're going to introduce you in a minute to Micaiah Johnson and to Mary Robinette Kowal, who have agreed to join us today. This is our second of the Hugo's show this year. Last year, we picked the various categories and the various finalists came in to speak with you. And this year, we decided to give a little bit more personal attention to actually get to know the various finalists, to learn about their work, because we have more time, which is pretty amazing. So with that said, I think that we can ask Micaiah and Mary Robinette to join us. Hey, thanks for joining.
Oh,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to it, especially when I found out that you had me paired with Mikaya, because I hope you don't mind, Mikaya, but when we get to talk, I'm planning on asking you all the questions about your PhD on race and robots.
I do not mind. I have been your unofficial stalker for a very long time. So I literally described you. I was like, don't worry about it. She's basically an astronaut. Just read all of her books.
I would not even qualify to apply. And I know that because I look at the application every time it opens.
Listen, we're going to manifest it. We are going to manifest it on a spaceship.
I love this.
Thank you both for coming. You two are awesome. With that, Mary Robinette, you will join us in about 20 minutes.
That sounds great.
We can start with talking to Micaiah. And Karen, maybe you can start us off.
Let's tell you all a little bit about Micaiah if you don't know her. This is Micaiah Johnson. She grew up in the California Mojave Desert, surrounded by trees named Joshua, which if you've never seen them are really susical, and women who told stories. She studied at UC Riverside and got her BA in creative writing there, and her MA in fiction from Rutgers Camden, and now the PhD that she is working on that Mary Robinette mentioned is in American literature at Vanderbilt University, where, as Mary Robinette mentioned, she's focusing on critical race theory and automatons, which we will absolutely find out more about for you, with you. Whose debut novel, The Space Between Worlds, is a sci-fi novel using the concept of the multiverse to examine privilege. So, Micaiah, thank you so much for being with us. And with that, we'll head into your section.
We have read your book.
Oh, okay.
I mean, all of us read a book. One of us read all your books. If you have more than 10 books, then we haven't read more of your books. No, to the point. One thing that we all agreed on is, why a multiverse? What appeals to you about the multiple perspectives? It came at us so strongly from the book, and we wondered, she must have had something beyond just creating this setting in mind when she did this, and we really want to know.
It's absolutely, for me, and this is probably true of all science fiction for me, it just seems such an excellent vessel to examine kind of social ideas that come out of, I'm going to call it the mundane world, but our like material reality that we engage with, as a way of examining privilege. Like, we can talk till we're blue in the face about, well, statistically, if you're born in this zip code versus if you're born in this zip code, you do much better, you do much worse. However, like, there's no way of proving that in our material reality. However, by employing the multiverse, it's like, but what if you could? What if you could visibly see yourself in these different scenarios and play out what we know statistically to be true in our world? And just using that as kind of a mechanism for that sort of exploration was really appealing to me.
I've heard many definitions for science fiction over the years, and one of my favorite ones is about being able to get into the head of a character so that you believe something you wouldn't normally. And when that barrier collapses and you have to face, I just made a completely different observation, decision, ethical choice. It becomes real, and that's something that's very special in science fiction. And you taking it and actually making it a part of the setting, so we can observe it from the outside as well as within. It's just amazing. Did you have anything else that you did with that you played with that, or?
Yes, absolutely. It was such a strange kind of experience, and it's not a unique experience where you begin in a place where you get your character, you understand it, and you agree with them. And then you get to the place where you're just like, well, you're just wrong about everything, without actually realizing it means that you are wrong about everything.
Wait, you meant to tell me that you did not try to colonialize all of this multiverse to your own opinion? How dare you?
I know. People always ask me like, oh, is Kara you? And I'm just like, I wish. I am a coward. I am not nearly as driven.
No way.
So if anything, Kara is definitely my big sister.
One of the things that I really thought was sort of haunting and beautiful about this multiverse frame was this idea that you can only visit ones where you've already died. Like what inspired that choice, or what do you think you sort of accomplished by making that choice, or what dynamics did you create that you got to play with?
And this is, again, we're talking about science fiction as a genre. Like when you have such an opening and you have a world in which anything can be possible, what restrictions are you going to give yourself? And so for me, the big one is I knew that capitalism was still going to be an issue. And the second was this other rule where it's like, you can't just convene with all your other selves. You can't just go there and meet them and speak to them. In fact, doing so will kill you. So you can't actually ask the questions that you want to of like, oh, what did you do at that party where I left? Did you stay? What happened? You can't actually get that kind of closure, that kind of like access to nirvana, access to all knowing or something. And so I really wanted to have that obstacle and to have that be the first thing that people know. And then of course to destabilize that knowledge is all I will say without spoiling anything, but certainly to have that be a rule and then play with that.
Right, because there's such an urge to explore the choices you didn't make.
Be the first thing I would do. The first thing I would do would just like knock on next universe time and be like, so which school did you go to? What did you do? Did you stay in this field? Like, who did you stay with that one person? Like, what happened?
Totally. I've had the thought before, like, I wish I could clone myself and another version of me could live out this path. And like, you created that scenario, but then frustrated it.
Yes.
It's wonderful. I'm also curious about what was your, some of the names in this book are really interesting. What were there a particular thought process behind some of the names, like the Rurals, Ashtown? Did any of those have a cool, story or place in your heart?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like I seeded this book with Easter eggs to my own delight, which is very counterintuitive because I feel like I write every book assuming it's like no one's ever going to read it, right? Or maybe like 4 people are going to read it. And so I don't know for whom I was performing this Easter eggness, but I still get these thrills of delight when people tag me in like a revealing. So somebody's finally figured out that Niamey is in fact a god of the worlds near the Ivory Coast. And then somebody else found out Karamenta is actually a goddess of time. And then like with Ashtown and the Rurals, that was just very much like, I feel like it's common. Like, I know you're in California right now, but if you're in Southern California, like we have such a particularity of naming, right? Everything is 2 letters. You're in LA, the OC, the IE, or the HD, right? Or you're going down to TJ to get dental work in Manila. And so it's like one of those things where it's just all of these like very obvious things, and they're all very descriptive. It's like you're inland or you are in the high desert, and they're not elaborate, but they come to almost stand for something else where it's like, yes, the rurals are rural, but it's become a proper noun more than an adjective in this very particular way. And so that's very much drawn from like my upbringing and like that high desert experience where, Del Oro has a cement plant. If you go out to like Lucerne Valley, out to Joshua Tree, like that's rural, even though it's all rural. Like we're all just in the desert that is not LA, right? So yeah, I've had a lot of fun with naming things and like watching people discover different things about Nick Nick's name and all of these things. It's been good fun.
Yeah, it's so interesting that it's tied physically to Joshua Tree. I was there recently and just learned that it was actually unincorporated. I didn't know a place could be unincorporated. Like that's the idea of like what is a place or not, what is named, what is rural. I love that.
Yes, and how are those places cared for? Like if you were just Joshua Tree, so you know, like so much a thing, right? And there's like all kinds of things that just don't make it there, but then that's what you trade for, that kind of also absence of control. No one's going to tell you how many cars you can have in your front yard, right? So yeah, it's really, I love unincorporated land as a strangely liminal type of citizenship.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Karen.
I don't know, you made a gesture. I assumed that meant you were going to say something.
That makes sense. A gesture, that sounds ominous. So I kind of wanted to pick it exactly from here when we talk about physical things to spirituality. You come from, I don't know if you want to touch on that, so I will not necessarily go there, but you come from a very interesting background, and I was wondering about all these wonderful things that you have done within the different cultures of the book. And I just wanted to know, if it's okay not to talk necessarily about the book immediately, your thoughts on spirituality, if you're willing to share with us, and how that came into the book later.
No, absolutely. Like, obviously, it was very important to me that, or I don't even know if it was important to me consciously, or was an inevitability for me that religion would be discussed, right? I grew up in an incredibly structured religion with not a lot of space for doubt. I was raised Jehovah's Witness, and kind of seeing the blind faith of this place where I come from, these kind of structures that I come from, and putting that in communication with science, right? That's why I have these kind of epigraphs of like scientific communities of certainty versus religious communities of certainty, and that kind of odd negotiation of how those things overlap. Like thinking of someone like the Chiukaku, right? Where you can kind of hold these things in your head. And that's why I think the ruralites are so important to me, is because they are, yes, going through their life and going through their faith, but they're also this really convenient mechanisms for survival. And that is what I think of a lot when it comes to spirituality, is like there are these structures, there are these organized religions, certainly, but when it comes down to it, and particularly in a place like the desert where it's very hard not to believe in kind of a supernatural otherness, right? It's a very eerie place, it's a very uncanny place. These mechanisms for survival that come out of community, and often the controlling aspect of that community is religion, right? That's how a lot of communities were formed. For the high desert, there were just so many different kinds of religions came there, right? And so that's how I think of spiritually. At its best, it's a mechanism for survival. As its worst, mechanism for control, right? So that's kind of what I want to do, because I think of science very much the same way, as a kind of mechanism for survival and a belief that needs to happen for us to live our lives and go through every day. These kind of certainties that are comforting. And so I put those in conversation kind of deliberately. That being said, like when I wrote this book, I could not have foreseen the kind of rapid anti-science kind of discourse we would be having like during COVID. So now I'm just like, wait, it's not just like magic. It's not just like magic. Hang on, wait. But yes, I do think that there are some like hierarchies that should be challenged. That's one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of faith involved in science that we don't totally address.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, because forgive me for picking on a few words that what you said. A lot of things that are really important. I keep wanting to pull on Nisi Shaw, who was with us a few times on the show to talk about the spirituality aspects of what you said. But I'll take only two words, if that's okay for a second, not to dismiss everything else you said. Negotiating spirituality, which I kind of want to take out and say, that's amazing. I love that. And equating that to survival as kind of the vision or goal. I'm not sure I'm processing that. How does that work?
No, absolutely. So for me, there's the direct practical, right? The high desert's at the end, kind of the end of the Mormon trail. It's like kind of in that aspect where, in a very literal sense, communities had to be linked together in order to literally survive. But when I think about it more in a contemporary sense, it's also about like what keeps you alive. And what I mean by alive, it could be a literal physical aliveness, but I also mean very much like what keeps you going, what fills your wonder, what makes life livable and bearable as we all kind of trudge along through all the different.
So is this what you're talking about? Is this grit? Is this passion? Is it the inevitability? Is it? You put so much passion into these words that I just made these words into what you're saying, and I just keep wondering if. Do you see this to be the same? Did you take this from how you view life in the real world?
Only in such that, and I wouldn't say grit, I would say more a balm, right? Something to make life more livable. And so that relates to survivability in that way. I think people can and are free to use spirituality as a balm. And whether that spirituality is a communing with nature, or whether it's a very old religion that gives them peace and comfort, that's the role that I see spirituality playing at its best, is a kind of balm and comfort that makes life livable and makes, survival a little bit more survivable. You seem so dissatisfied. You're just like,
No, I'm thinking about what I'm taking the risk of leaving silence on the radio to think about what you said, especially because I cut you off earlier. I couldn't stop myself.
No. It was absolutely a journey, because I think, and this is probably true of many of us who lead very structured religions as teenagers, right? For a long time, I was like the very obnoxious, like anti-religion, very anti-faith, and like schmarmy teen who like listened to music just to be edgy. And I kind of had to move outside of the rage portion of my like quarrel with faith in order to get to a place where it's like, okay, but here's how, like, your experience is not the world, your hurt is not the world's hurt, right? So here's other ways in which, spirituality functions in a beneficial way for other people. And everybody who like stops to pray is not failing themselves or you or society. So for me, it's definitely been this arc from like edgy, like angry goth teen to like, oh, okay, but there's spaces for all these things in the world, and trying to like approach that conversation with more grace, which if you'd asked like 18-year-old Kaya, you would have gotten a ridiculous response and in some like hot topic gear.
Yeah,
I want to actually go with Karen. I wonder what Karen wants to say and what I wanted Karen to say. Karen, what did you want to say?
What did you want me to say, Gotti?
I wanted to complain for a second about the best things always happening near the end of the discussion or the interview or whatever you want to call this. Like when Joe Haldeman was here and he talked about, how he wrote his famous book, The Forever, or just to explore his relationships with his gay friend, because at the time, relationship meant only romantic, right? And now I'm once again feeling that, because at the end of this conversation, going past my own explosion here on my side, struggle with spirituality, with religion. And I want to ask so much about that. And then I wanted to turn to Karen, because Karen had really similar things to say on art and science. But I will shut up now. It's all Karen. Till the end.
I was actually going to say, I was going to comment on the fact that it's interesting what phases of healing from things actually look like the phase where you're still actively very angry about something and bring conversations back to it is at the time feels like you've made it through, and later doesn't at all look like that to you. When the angry atheist phase, I think a lot of us can relate to.
Right.
I was actually going to ask about how you used this work to try to explore themes of classism. The racism elements are clear as well, but like they're, the way you interweave that with classism or class structures.
Yes, absolutely. And this is one of those things where sometimes, I don't know, you tell on yourself in books without realizing it, because I was like, I'm inventing this entire journey from nothing. Aren't I brilliant? And I never stopped to interrogate that I begin this book after leaving the high desert to go to the Northeast and moving to Philadelphia. And I never made that transition as I like entered higher education from like the opposite of higher education, right? And so a lot of this was me unknowingly kind of transferring that journey where it's just like, yes, there's racism where you are a marked body. And then there's this other thing. There's this kind of polite higher class that is also a racism, but it's reinforcing these other ways because there's markers of belonging beyond skin. And it's very It's very interesting because, again, like I think that we see a lot of, and in fiction, we're very comfortable with like you kind of like very Southern angry racists, right? We're very comfortable with banjo burning cross racism and putting that in fiction. We don't really address like the polite upper class. Oh, I think
really
you're all so great. Can I touch your hair? Racism.
With racism,
Yes.
with that sort of racism. I wouldn't have put it that way, but you're right.
Like,
you are right.
It gives something to gesture to, where it's like, oh, look at that thing that I'm not. As opposed to like this much more subtle, you belong, like you're here, you were included, but then there's all of these layers of politics in that, including because, you know, you weren't raised speaking the right way or knowing how to speak this way. And almost the bait of being able to assimilate is like really, really attractive. And that's kind of Kara's whole issue, where it's just like, I could like change the way I talk and change the way I dress and fixate on that to eventually belong. But it's just like, but is that true belonging? And having to realize that maybe that dream isn't as achievable or isn't as meant, maybe even she shouldn't be wanting to achieve it as much. Like all of that kind of self-work where, you know, I think this is true for a lot of us who grow up, you know, not wealthy. We're just like, oh yeah, you got to get there. You got to get to the fancy car and the big house. You never stop to think like, is that actually the dream? It's just, you just know, you just grow up so aspirationally. It's really hard to think like, oh, what if I, you know, stay in the smaller house and have a giant garden or something? You know, there are different ways of being happy. But it takes a while to like kind of interrogate that because we have the dream. It's like, I saw Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and that's the house that I want, you know?
And I think it's interesting that you say it's different ways to be happy, because I think the real bait and switch is that sometimes the things that you might by default sort of get the message you should aspire to may not be very good at making you happy.
Yeah, it may make you miserable, and all those people you wanted to be are miserable and you didn't even know.
Yeah, or it works for them, but it might not for you because that was their family and community from the beginning, and you've maybe lost some of yours on the way.
Yes.
One of the interesting things for me was, forgive the analogy, my brain works in mysterious ways. And I usually don't go to Buffy analogies anymore because of Josh. But when it took me years to realize that the musical, which I think was season 6, episode 8, but don't.
What's More With Feeling?
Yeah, What's More With Feeling. The song where the Thunder and they're a couple there, right? And they're talking and they're saying, "I'll never tell." Right? Their toes are hairy, whatever. I'm not going to sing. Mary Robinette can sing for us if she wants. I'm not going to do that to you. But I think that if a person came to me and said, don't you think that that song taught an entire generation about relationships and how they're not perfect and how they're about openness, but at the same time not necessarily saying everything? And reading your book, I felt that taking us through this process, opening up this process with us, did that for me at my advanced age. It kind of took me through that and taught me on how to explore these things, if that makes sense. So did you try to, do you have a message? I mean, we talked about privilege and we talked about race and we talked about a lot of things. Do you have a message that you're trying to give out, to put out there?
I feel like messages are for people who are sure. What I have, I think, are questions that I invite others to toil under as well. So I don't know how helpful that is, but one of those things is, you know,
best.
kind of, it's less comforting, but at least we're in this confusion together of how to work between like what we want to be without losing ourselves, how to like have these dreams and not, you know, lose our rootedness, and how to, again, like survive and help each other survive, and what role community plays if we're always obsessed with moving forward. How does that work? So it's basically all of this question of how to keep yourself while trying to make yourself, I guess, is what I'm working through and what I've invited others to work through with me in this book.
Almost like a little bit of a therapy. You know, going on tangent again for a second, and then I want to move to what you're doing next. Reading nonfiction is not easy for me, but reading nonfiction on leadership or on management or self-help or whatever it is, I've often found, and I don't want to include all these books in, of course, but many of the books in there are about 300 to 400 pages long that could be summarized in 14 pages, repeat themselves a lot throughout, and then written by consultants, meaning people who have not necessarily done things themselves. And then while they make sense to me, it seems like they're built for a person who's not always me, so I can get inspired, but these things won't work for me, and that one aside. It almost feels like I always like to learn, whether it's about farming or space, through reading. And you are sort of making this. I don't want to say it's all about that. I think it's a small part of what you're trying to do, but what you're saying. But it's almost like on top of everything else you're doing, you're letting me through fiction, not just think about things and grow, but rather make it. This is your self-help right now. Come with me, and we'll take a journey.
I mean, isn't that what art always is, though? I mean, good art. I feel like that's what art, the best art is, where it's not just here's something that has nothing to do with you, and we're going on a adventure. It's here's a mirror and this is what's happening and we're going to go through this, because even if the character isn't just like you discover yourself through that negation where it's like, well, I'm not like this person, and that tells something about yourself too. But no, I love that idea. I mean, obviously, like I have a bit of a feature of therapy in this book because I do feel like, you know, there's absolutely a place for like actual therapy for sure. But I feel like art does help us find ourselves. And I think that's one of the beauties of it is that those journeys, because they're not trying to be self-help books, they're not trying to prescribe to you, they're instead just invitation to a journey. It's easier, I think, to go along with it and find yourself in it because nobody's prescribing it to you, right? So I read a notice, which is true when I was young, and it has nothing to do with me. It is I think he's 40 years old in 1992, struggling with masculinity and a twin brother. And it had nothing to do with me when I was 16, but I loved that book and I learned about myself through that book. And so I think that that's the beauty of fiction, is that kind of mirror holding and that kind of journey and that kind of invitation. It makes it so much easier. It's like the sugar with the medicine is a great story, and it makes it so much easier to imbibe these lessons.
Are you describing portal fantasy into yourself?
All right, we've got just a couple more minutes if we're going to bring in Mary Robinette, and so I just wanted to ask, what are you up to next?
So I'm so happy this is happening now because I can now officially announce that we have sold the next book. So that is going to be coming up. That's going to be a thing. It breaks my heart because I've been put on so many lists of like, these are my favorite standalones. And I'm just like, ooh. But it's still going to be kind of standalone-y. It's just there's a universe at play now. But yes, I'm super stoked about that. But also, this book just came out in paperback, and hardbacks are heinously expensive. So I've been telling people just get the paperback, just get the paperback. So that's out now. But yeah, so that's basically what I'm kind of absorbed in right now, is making sure all those things happen.
Amazing.
That's very cool. Yeah. I think I just shifted through.
I was going to say, can you announce if it will follow the same character or the same universe?
I can tell you that there will be familiar faces, but it will not have the same primary main character.
Okay.
So it may be somebody you've seen before but didn't pay attention to. Anyway.
So I will spoil for everybody because I hate when this happens unannounced, but I just shifted between realities because I have read 9 of your books. I have. And I just I don't know how, but I shifted realities, and I am really careful with spoilers right now. But
did you just joke? You moved to the forward, so you know what's happening. You're Doctor Strange.
I make bad jokes. I make big jokes, especially about multiverses. I always fuck those up.
I mean, knowing I'm going to get to 9 books is great, so I love that.
more, even more. But yeah, Thank you so much. You're amazing. We love you.
Thank you.
And please write faster. I know it's really rude to say. When you want to and when it's comfortable for you, please write faster because we love you.
Thank you. I will do my best. I will get 6 fingers, Blade Runner style.
Okay, I will stop myself from quoting The Princess Bride. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll see you a little bit later.
Yes, we'll bring you back shortly, but want to bring on Mary Robinette Kowal now, who is excited to have joining us. While she gets her, hello. If you don't know Mary Robinette, she's the author of the glamorous history series, Ghost Talkers, and the Lady Astronaut series. She's part of the award-winning podcast Writing Excuses and has received the Astounding Award for Best New Writers, 4 Hugos, the Nebula, the Locus Award. She's had stories appear everywhere, Asimov's Uncanny, several years Best Analogies, and somewhat more surprisingly, if you don't know, she's a professional puppeteer and performs as a voice actor. So when she's not doing those, she's also, if that's not enough, president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. And we're so excited to have her joining us again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am only the president of SIFWA for 3 days, 8 hours, and 28 minutes.
But who's counting, right?
So
Definitely
if you're
no one.
watching a recording of this, it is likely no longer the case, but this is coming to you from the past.
I'll say I'm personally really excited to have Mary Robinette here because from afar, trying to not be one of the fans and cling a lot, I have learned so much from Mary Robinette. I am very much an amateur writer, never intending to do any more beyond being amateur. And being a Martha Graham, I believe, I sometimes forget names correctly, but she was big in dance, in modern dance specifically. And in one of their books about choreography, I do remember the page, I think it's 36, she said that often dancers don't necessarily like to think too much. They like to do. They want to do it naturally, whatever that means. And then once in a while, not saying that they don't have this quality, somebody comes in who is more of an engineer. And everybody says, why let's just do it, And they push the art forward. And that's how I feel about Mary Robinette and her work around teaching and explaining writing, taking people through I think you affected a lot of our lives, so I want to thank you about that.
Well, thank you. It's Writing Excuses is a great podcast to be a part of. I love working with the various other instructors. Every time we do an episode, I'm like, oh, wait, what did you just say? I just need to write that down right now. So it's great.
All right. So we actually prepared a question for you here.
How exciting.
And I would like to read it. I know you are probably one of the people who gets interviewed the most. And when we had Charlene Harris on at some point, she said, well, we love Charlene. She's a part of the family. But she said, I want to give a gift to somebody who will ask me a question that I've never been asked. And trying to think about that for you, I gave up immediately. But we did want to know, knowing that you have been asked a million questions about the Lady Astronaut series, if you'll humor us, we want to turn it around. What do you most want to tell us about the series?
Oh, what do I most want to tell you about the series? What I most want to tell you is that I'm hoping that someone will completely fall in love with it and invite me to go on the Vomit Comet so that I can experience weightlessness. That is like, if I'm going to give a message to the universe, please invite me to go on the Vomit Comet so that I can experience weightlessness. I promise not to eat breakfast. I promise to take Dramamine, and I promise to put things into the book. But also you get to go through Mars gravity and lunar gravity as they're building up the parabolas. That's probably not at all what you wanted me to tell you about, but if I had to say something about the books, that's the thing.
Honestly, when you were saying before that you look at the application form every day, I was just thinking to myself, this is likelier and likelier to happen as more companies have their own Vomit Comets available, and as your books get more widely known. I was like, I give it a solid chance over 5 years.
Yeah, it's like, I know that I could spend $5,000 and do it, but there's also other things that I could do with $5,000 that, and I'm not at a point. So anyway, but and sometimes there's just a space, I don't take up much space.
Is that how the resources are metered out? I mean, I guess it probably is. Like a lot of it's just fuel. Yeah,
it's basically, it's the same thing that is with any airplane.
Yeah, so low cost of goods is on the list of pros.
Yep.
All right, to switch over a little bit into these awards, since we are excited about these award seasons coming up. What do you feel the benefits are having won all of the awards? What do you feel that the benefits are to having won a Hugo or Nebula?
So there's two ways for me to answer that. One is as a fan, which I am, and that's the thing that I think people should remember about every writer is that we all start as fans, and most of us stay fans even while we're doing this other thing as well. So as a fan, it means that I have written something that has touched people, and it's this external validation. Every time I have won one, the thing that I do is I carry it around the next day and let other people hold it, because other people at Worldcon, the ones who vote for it, most of them never get to touch one. They'll see it from a distance on the stage, and I'm like, here, you can hold it. I have it because of you. Hold it. So that's one side. On the professional side, as a writer, every time I've won one, when you look at my numbers, there is a decided bump. It makes a profound difference on the sales, and also on the gift baskets that my publisher sends me. These are our priorities. But
is this like what's it called, the something Muncie that people read into the editors, and what they said, rejectomancy.
Rejectomancy.
This is the size of the basket I get from the publisher.
My gift basketomancy. Yeah.
Yeah, taking the thick envelope further.
Yes, exactly. So those are the two things. But I mean, they're rocket ships. How can you not want a rocket ship?
Yeah, they are that, and
I do hear they can be dangerous, though. Quite heavy and quite pointy.
Yes, it's funny when I won my first Hugo. I was not expecting it, and I get up on stage, and David Levine, who's an old dear friend of mine, is the one who's handing it to me. And as he hands it to me, he says, "Careful, it's sharp." But his mic was still hot. So you can hear this whisper, "Careful, it's sharp," and he's not wrong.
That's somehow adorable. Of all the things he could have said, it's perfectly unharmful.
Yeah,
in fact, he's warning you it's harmful.
Yes.
All right. One of the things going on recently in the industry is just there are some recent victories in securing authors' rights for payment when their works are sold and resold by large media companies. I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about this, and so just sort of your thoughts on how we as fans should appreciate the meaning of that.
Sure. So there's a hashtag Disney Must Pay, or you can visit writersmustbepaid.org to get like all of the details about this. But in brief, one of the things that I have been shepherding during my time as president at SFWA began with a single member having coming to us with a contract complaint because he wasn't receiving his royalties, and that was Alan Dean Foster, and the company that was not paying his royalties was Disney, as you may guess from hashtag Disney Must Pay. We suspected that there would be more authors if we went public with it, that if they were doing this to Alan Dean Foster, that they were doing it to others. That proved to be the case. They did it to the authors of the original trilogy. So all three of those, it's been a lot. Anne Crispin, AC Crispin, who writers will know because she was one of the founders of Writer Beware, wrote Alien, and she wrote some Alien novels in the Han Solo trilogy. Her estate is not receiving royalties. So when we started digging into it, we are around 20 authors that we know of now, 80-ish titles that we are aware of. We think that there's more. We've been told that this is industry practice. And we've also gotten some writers paid. The thing that's frustrating right now is that prose writers are being treated differently than comic writers. We've been getting prose writers paid. We have yet to get any of the comic writers paid. So what people can do is talk about it, hashtag Disney Must Pay. And we're encouraging people to, if they know of an author who writes media tie-in, to make sure that they know about writersmustbepaid.org. We have a lot of these people either were not agented when they were doing the contract, or have left that agent, or have never had an agent. And so we have agents who are willing to help. We have a forensic accountant. We have templates. We have all of these resources, and a lot of authors look at it and go, I don't want to go through this fight. But SIFWA is there for you, and we have partnered with multiple different writer organizations, and that's all of these writer organizations believe that this is, if it affects one author, it is every author's problem, because among other things, this could become a standard. And begin to, it's like, if they get away with it with the comic writers, then why wouldn't they start doing it with the prose writers? If they get away with it with the prose writers, then, maybe they'll start doing it with the film and television writers. It's like, this affects all of us. So
absolutely, like the value of not, I don't want to use the word unionizing, but of banding together is clear across so many industries. It's there's so many aphorisms. Rising tide raises all ships. Stronger together. All of those things are true, and it's been really heartening to work with the other writer organizations. They've been phenomenal. Yeah, thank you for all that you've done there.
Thank you. I would like to, in my head, it's connected, but it probably isn't. I would like to take us to a different aspect of this, something that I know you love and are passionate about, which is space.
Really? Passionate about space?
No, really?
What are you talking about? I have no idea.
Well, I was wrong, but I'll ask my question anyway. I don't think people saw. You have to take the screen back by saying something.
I just am drinking very slowly and carefully from this Apollo 12 glass that I just happen to have, not because I like space at all.
So, I'll be honest. I don't have this down. I don't have this question down, and I don't want to surprise you. So I will appreciate your flexibility and patience with me for no more than 30 seconds as I try to get it down, because I already wasted 30 seconds on the introduction. I think space does good for the world. I've seen it here in Israel with Space IL. All of a sudden, everybody's trying to learn about it in schools, and in the US, NASA. When I don't know why, but one of the only things that truly excite me and make me giddy and jumping up and down is when I see a launch and when I see space technology. It excites me so much. And I was wondering what your take is on this, whether it's through your work or NASA or world in general. Something education, something inspiration, something space, and you. And that's the best I can do with this question. I'm sorry.
So what you're asking me is basically like, why is space important for people? For me and for other people? Like, why should people be excited about this thing that most of us will never get to experience?
No, but I will go with that. Thank you so much.
What were you going to ask? Because I did not.
No, I'm happy with that completely. I feel space is inspirational. It does good for the world. We're not doing enough of that inspiration, and you are doing a lot of it. But I prefer your question. Let's go with that.
Okay. Were you asking me how can we do more inspirational things?
Let's just go with your thing.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna Kjell Lindgren, who most of the Worldcon and Nebula attendees have probably met at some point, because he is an astronaut who a nerd like us. He said a thing about, like, people ask, why go to Mars? Why go to the moon? Why not just send robots? And he said, why go to Yellowstone? Like, you can read about it. Why go there? And the answer is the human experience. That going to some place teaches you about yourself, and it teaches you about the place in ways that you cannot get through another medium. Can you learn a lot Yes, from a book. Absolutely. That is how I write most of my novels, by books. But when you can go someplace and experience for yourself, you can bring things back and distill them for people. And there's so many things that we experience and use on a daily basis that are space technology. Hi, this cell phone, your cordless drill, the Depends that your elderly relative wears. In my household, with the excuse me, there's definitely mom and dad, no elderly people living in this house, and I don't know any elderly relatives at all. However, we call them MAGs because that's what the astronauts call them, maximum absorbency garments, which are diapers. But there are all of these things, these tangible results of going into space. But then the intangible, which is the larger worldview of realizing that when you look at the Earth from space, there are no boundaries, and that something, that when you're watching a wildfire from space and you can see the smoke spreading across the continent and across the ocean to another continent, and you know that every action that a person takes has ripple effects, even in ways that you don't think it does. So for me, those are all this is why I think space is exciting, and interesting, and also, rockets. I mean, I am still a science fiction nerd, and I would just like to just go.
Absolutely. So I want to actually hear more about your puppetry, because I just am sort of obsessed with puppets. And what parallels do you see between some of the characters that you've written in your novels and the work that you do with puppetry and creating characters there?
Sure. So when I was listening to Mikaya, I was thinking about some of the things that she was saying about how science fiction, gave you this kind of distance that allows you to look at larger issues. And puppetry does the same thing. Both of them are ways of using a metaphor and manifesting it in ways that gives the audience just a little bit of space. The way I describe it is that it takes the world, tips it to the side, and allows you to see the interconnected tissue. With puppets in specific, what happens is that you, the audience, are responsible for the animation of that figure as much as I am. There's a saying that we have, which is the difference between playing with dolls and a puppet show is the audience. Mm. Because you have to meet me halfway, and the puppet exists in this liminal space between us. And that is also true for writing. It's like I put these words down on a page, and what I'm hoping is that it will build an image in your head. But that relies on you wanting to engage with that, and that you are going to bring your own building blocks to this story, that you're going to construct part of it. It's like I describe a bunch of stuff, but I don't describe everything in a room. You build the rest of that. I describe one aspect of a character's expression, and you describe everything else. Like with a puppet, Miss Piggy, which is the one most people, I'm pretty reliably, people know. You think about how she, when she's flirting with Kermit, how she flutters her eyelashes at him, right? Except she doesn't have working eyelids. Like her eyelashes 100% don't move. She can't roll her eyes at him. That fixed expression. But you build that in your head, and that happens on the page too. And that, to me, that collaboration between audience and storyteller, whether it's as a puppeteer or as a writer, that's kind of what I'm there for.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you working on now? Like, what do you have upcoming that you would, want to tell our listeners about?
I have the next thing that I'm going to have out in the world is a picture book called Molly on the Moon, which is about a little girl going to the moon. And then the next thing for adults that I have is a work of science fiction. It is not a historical, it is like science fiction, called The Spare Man, which is basically, if you've seen the Thin Man movies, it's basically the Thin Man in space. It's a murder mystery on an interplanetary cruise ship going between Earth and Mars with a happily married couple and their adorable dog, Gimlet.
Oh, I don't know what it says about me that I'm as or more excited about the picture book as the deeper experience, but I sort of just love. I still love children's books. Like if you want to convince people of things or sell them dreams, like it works so much better on children.
Yeah, and they are unforgiving. Like if you are wrong or dull, they will absolutely let you know I love them as an audience, but I also love picture books. They're so pretty. It's so much art.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Gadi.
Karen.
All right. That didn't work.
I think this is the thing you ate the most, except for when I ask you if you're excited.
Yeah, second most. That's right. Cataloging my annoyances.
Anyway, yeah, we will invite Mikaya to come back and join us. Hi, Mikaya.
Hey.
And while I'm sure I'll interrupt because I wouldn't be able to stop myself, I think that just having you and Mary Robinette here talking to each other, I'll do my best, more than I've ever done, to just listen.
But we can kick you off with one thing that, I'm curious about both of your thoughts on, which is what works and finalists from this year's Hugo ballot are you most excited about?
All of them, yes.
Yeah, all of them. Like, this is such a strong ballot. I have not picked up anything where I've been like, well, now it's an easy choice. Everything I pick up, I'm like, well, this is hard.
Yes. I gotta start reading into them a little bit, because last year, for example, they were all kind of, I feel, talking to each other, and they were all also fans of myth and legends and portal fantasies and going through the forest and seeing a door. I have to go through that. It was just an amazing conversation. I have to start getting into that. Shit, I just interrupted and I used shit as a word again. I'll go back out.
You made it a good 3 minutes though, and that's impressive. That's discipline.
I will say that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I will say that last year we did a series of shows with panels with people nominated in different of the categories, and so I made a goal to read all of the works of everybody who was going to be in the panel. So it wasn't like, well, I'd read one of them or some, but not another. And keeping up this clip, like we film this every week, so having to read the entire panel, within a week was like being force-fed food I really wanted to eat, but not this quickly. Like it just absolute whiplash of good material. But it's challenging. Like something that gets nominated for Hugo probably has new ideas that you want to chew on for a while, but there's no time. You have to read the next one. So I highly recommend and don't recommend reading them all as quickly as you can.
Are you excited about anything, Mikaya?
Yes, very much so. And it's, again, like it's such a stacked category. I did a panel with Simon Jimenez just a few weeks ago, and I was just like, how are you so good and so clever and like so engaging in person? That's not fair. That's greedy. But the Banished Birds is amazing. And there's so many where I'm just like, wow, like these are definitely like the top dogs. I'm just thrilled. Like, and it's like I haven't, and kind of you said this somewhat earlier, Mary, where I haven't thought about it as myself as a nominee. I'm just like, oh my God, this person got it. Yes, this person. I'm just completely fangirling out. It's my first like Hugo, so I am just doing the like fantasy football for nerds thing where I'm just like, oh yes, like I knew this was gonna happen. I knew this person's gonna be on there. I'm so excited for this. It hasn't hit me that I am one of those people yet. Yeah. Maybe sometime between now and December that will happen. But right now I'm just like, it's like I'm going to watch other people at the Oscars.
That is actually my secret for how I don't just completely freak out, is that I do pick someone in each category. Anytime I'm nominated, I pick someone else in my category that's the person that I'm rooting for. And that way, like when they're coming up and they're saying the names, I'm like, this person, and then I can be like, yes, or disappointed on their behalf. And I can kind of cut myself out of the equation. I also have learned that, and I highly recommend this to everyone, that I think, okay, if I win, I'm going to get this fancy prize for myself. And if I lose, I'm going to get this exact same fancy prize for myself. So the day after the Hugos happen, either way, I get this very cool thing. So all I'm looking for is the day after the Hugos.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Because either way, the thing is coming.
Yes.
And then picking somebody else that you would like to win, it doubles your odds. It doubles your odds of being stoked.
Yeah,
yes.
It's great. I highly recommend it. Yeah.
I did.
This is emotional intelligence right here.
This is self-care. This is how self-care works.
Absolutely. Like I take care. I'm like, okay, what can I control? I can get, because I love ball gowns. So I'm like, I'm going to get myself a ball gown. I'm going to go and I'm going to get a massage day of. I'm going to go have my hair done and get my nails done. It is a day of pampering because I can control all of that. Everything about the award was over the moment the book was published. At the moment the book is out in the world, I lose all control.
No, I love that. You're writing a picture book, which Karen stole my question because I was going to ask you so many questions about puppeteering. But do you find that kind of in conversation, the picture book, like having this kind of art focus that's going to tell this story? Do you see those as like being together?
Yes. Yes, very much so. And I'm like, and we're going to segue from this into the link between puppetry and automaton. Yeah. So, there's the aphorism, show, don't tell, which actually comes out of film. And it comes out of silent film days when you had narration cards. And so they're like, try acting it out instead of saying Paris, just maybe put the Eiffel Tower behind you, because every time you did a title card, that was action time that you lost. So that was why show, don't tell was a thing. But with puppetry, what we would say is it's a puppet show, not a puppet tell, And what I found with the picture book was the same thing, that there were places where the action on the page was happening. I'm like, we can just cut this line that I wrote because it is the visuals are doing it. And there were other places where I'm like, oh, this visual does this slightly different thing than what I had in my head, but it's way cooler. So let me adjust this line to make that make sense. So it was great. It was this whole back and forth thing. I loved it a lot. So can we talk about puppets and automaton?
Yes, they absolutely are connected. I don't know if you've why would anybody have read this, Kaya? There was a 1920s article called The Actor and the Uber Marionette.
Yes.
And it literally we're just like, oh, the perfect form would be a puppet that could move without an actor, right?
Yeah.
Because it ascends from man toward godliness, but is still earthbound. And that's like the perfect form. So they're like cousins, right? They're very close. Like I just use the kind of umbrella term animated being, and I put automatons and I put robots and I put golems and I put patchwork girls and I put puppets all in this kind of space. But I think that there's absolutely something there. I am so fascinated by how puppetry works and how it interacts and how often puppets and mannequins exist alongside like robots and animated things. Like I'm thinking of Pinocchio, right?
Yeah,
like they're always alongside as like memory. No, they're absolutely connected. I'm fascinated by the entire idea that like automatons are so old, right? We invented automatons before we invented paper. Mm-hmm. We have for so long been like, what if we could do a thing and make it move?
Yeah.
That was our consideration as everything else is happening. Like, well, yeah, we'll make a septic tank, but also puppets, but also like automatons. Like these are important questions, and there's something human and that spontaneously rises again, like paper, where all of these different civilizations have automatons. There's something human that is satisfied by their existence, and I love studying them. I'm so fascinated by them.
Yeah. Do you know? You probably do, but the listening audience probably doesn't. Do you know where the word marionette comes from?
Oh no.
Ooh. So. It literally means Little Mary. Oh. And they in French churches they would have animated nativities that were and so Little Mary refers to these automaton puppet things that they made in order to, and that's how the word marionette comes into the language.
That's amazing. I did not know that. But I mean, obviously, like the rise of automatons, the clockwork automaton comes to us very religiously, right?
Yes.
If you ever want to terrify yourself, like Google clockwork monk, and it's one of the, I think, 1600s automatons where it's supposed to be like spiritual, but it's just this very creepy monk, like moving and bowing. And it's just the beginning of a horror movie.
Yeah.
Now, like looking at it, but at the time they loved it. Likewise, like Edison's talking dolls, where it's like, isn't this lovely? It's a robotic doll saying the Lord's Prayer, and it just sounds like a demon. Where it's like,
yeah,
really
They're so
sounds like an
horrifying.
interesting way to outsource your worship. You know?
truly, truly.
Yeah.
Yes. And it always has been. I mean, you had like Dionysus, the automaton, pouring like fake wine in like I think it was 120 BCE, whatever Heron of automaton, or Heron, the Heron of Alexandria lived. So you had like these weird religious automatons where it's like, what's happening? Is this a miracle? Are we calling this a miracle?
A friend of mine who builds robots was telling me about one of the a robot that she'd seen that literally converted water into wine. It just had it was full of wine, and you poured water into the top, and it would displace just enough wine to make the same amount of wine that you'd put in of water.
That's great.
One of the shows we've done is, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say one of my favorite automatons is someone made a duck with a digestive system.
Yes.
I'm like, the pooping duck.
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, what wackadoo thing? It's like, this duck is gonna poop. I'm like,
why?
Because it's there. Because
it can. Because it can. We want to make it happen.
Yeah.
One of the shows that we've often had is about brain. We've had a show a couple of times about AI and ethics. Because talking about robotics is one thing, AI is another thing. And a couple of things that have been raised have been about how we always thought that robots are going to replace us and take our jobs. And what ends up happening right now is they're actually becoming our bosses, middle management. And thinking about that, I wonder how it will come to be. Mary Robinette wanted to say something.
So, funny thing, that we tend to think of robots as being somehow we anthropomorphize things.
Yes.
Most American households have a robot in their house that they use every day, and it is called a dishwasher. And you forget that that is a robot because it's a box that stays in one place. And
Yes.
this is like the point at which you decide to anthropomorphize something. The definition of puppetry that I like most is the art of bringing to life an inanimate object. And so you look at these robots, and some robots you're like we have a Wilbur. Wilbur is our robot vacuum, and we've gendered it. I mean, it's a disc. It's a disc with brushes, right? But I think that a lot of that bringing to life an inanimate object is that because they are moving on their own. I'm talking about your PhD thing. Why am I talking about?
Yes.
But because there is that illusion of life, because they are moving by themselves, we tend to imbue them and do that halfway meeting, whereas the dishwasher never moves around. And all of its work is invisible behind a door. It's just a magic box. You put things in and then you pull them out and they're clean. And you don't think about the fact that it is taking the place of someone who used to wash dishes.
Which is really unjust because he's doing a great job.
Yes, an essential job.
And bringing us back to the ethics of the situation and inequality. I heard once in a history class, I think, could have been a podcast, that can you imagine a world where everything is taken care of? You don't need to do anything. Literally, you want to move your hand, somebody will do it for you. Exaggerating. Well, that world already existed, and that was ancient Rome with slavery. And it's truly fascinating listening to you two talk about our perceptions and trying to look into the future about how that might be affected.
That's what I was going to say. So often when you see these configurations of terror with AI, where it's like, they're going to take over and enslave us, they're going to XYZ, they're going to do this like colonizing work. It's like, that. We call that projection, right? That's us envisioning a robot that acts how we have acted. That's really terror of our own sins being visited upon us, right? So the idea that like, that's what they're going to do. It's like, you don't think that about ants, you don't think that about bees, but you have this vision of like the colonizing robot, like this true terror, but really it's right fear of our own shadow being cast again. Like, and that's something that where it's always like, so far, like when superintelligence emerges, I'm not confident that it will be we're going to take over and do this thing. I'm confident that it will just be the only thing that we know that AI likes is data. Like, I think people can be very disappointed that it's just going to be like, oh, here's a super smart AI that just watches a lot of reality TV or something. Not obviously to Murderbot, but there's going to be these things where it's like the idea that would be their first move. And it's just like, why? They don't, yeah.
No, I am right there with you. It is again that thing that we see with the puppets, that people will layer themselves onto that. You know, they will. I love shadow puppets in particular, because people will put so much and talk about the facial expressions of the character, and I'm like, that really, it is a silhouette. That is all body language. That is, and your brain adding to it. Have you read Towards the Semantics of Puppets by Steve Tillis?
No.
You would love it. Yeah. Sorry for all of the other people as we deep down the nerd.
Nothing
They're going to
geeks
talk
love
about
more.
writing at the end, and instead we're just like,
No.
robots.
There is
Robots
nothing
and
anybody loves more than book recommendations. I believe that I will overshare.
Yeah,
Go
no,
ahead.
I think most people are not going to pick up Towards the Semantics of Puppetry and be like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. But I think Mikaya will love it. Puppetry, The Ultimate Disguise, that one, I think the average, the people who are not falling deep down into the academic well of puppetry.
Yes.
I will just say, if Gadi and when we had discussed the show, if we'd been like, do you want to do a show on puppetry and robots? I think we would all have still shown up and wanted to have this conversation. So no harm on our side. And I doubt from the perspective of anyone listening either.
We do want to appreciate, I mean, this has gone so well and you enjoy each other and we enjoy you so much that we didn't want to cut you off, but we do appreciate your time, and we promised you this will not take this long, and therefore we will cut it off. We'll probably do it slowly, like over the next minute or two, but just boxing this in, as Karen likes to say in corporate meetings.
Perfect. Can I just, so we will talk about, here's a writing thing that I when you were talking about if there was a message in your fiction, and I just thought it was so smart, and it mirrors what I also agree, like totally agree with you, that writing a book that asks questions is so much more interesting than writing one that answers them. And it's the same thing we've been talking about that leaving space for the reader.
Yes.
And I think that's, the moment in the first chapter of your book when she finds out that another version of her has died, and it's just like, and the ramifications of that, and recognizing her, I was just like, I'm like, yes, I am here for this book. this book is going to go to all of the places that I want to explore.
Too soon. I'm crying here. I really am.
It's so good.
Thank you. Like, hearing that from you, I cannot explain to you how surreal an experience this is. Like, if I went back in time 2 years and I was like, this is what's going to happen, I'd be like, stop lying. It's not nice. Calm down, brain. Like, bring it down to reality.
What we should do, since Nashville, is we should meet at the Parthenon and talk about robots and puppets while looking at the ridiculous Athena.
The ridiculous Athena. It's like, why would you paint what?
It's 80s makeup on her.
It's so bad. It's so bad. Who authorized? Who paid money?
Next time you go, tell me that she does not look like an Osmond.
I will do this, and I will like tag you on Twitter and be like put little music notes.
Yes, please tag us too.
Yes.
I want to see this. I want this to happen. Okay, we are going to finish up by asking you guys what you want to promote. One last moment to promote something upcoming, your work, someone else's work, whatever you want to promote.
I know we already asked this, but if you're involved in something, you have a cause you want to promote, if you have another book or short story waiting to happen, if you have an idea,
show, anything,
puppet show, anything, please, we want to give you this space.
Both are like,
So I got flooded. I'm like, I had the one thing. But just apart from my work, one thing that I would want to promote is Kimbo Young is a writer whose short story collection, which is I'm Waiting for You, is coming out. And I don't know if this is the first time she's been translated, but I was lucky enough to get an advanced copy, and it's so good. And it's that kind of science fiction that is so thoughtful, and like you don't know if you're crying or dazzled, and it's like as emotional as it is striking. So I absolutely want to promote that 100%. It's such a good short story, and everybody should read it. And I'm just going to be really annoying about it for the next few months because it's so good.
And just so we can put a link into the comments, do you know what it's called? The short story collection? Or
the short story collection is, I think it's I'm Waiting for You. Let me make sure. Yeah, I'm Waiting for You and Other Stories.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna recommend a short novel, which is After the Dragons by Cynthia Zhang, Zhang. It's very quiet, intimate story that's set in a Beijing in which dragons are very small and as plentiful as pigeons, but still magical. And it's this lovely, quiet romance, falling in love, coming of age story. And they're dragons, and it's so atmospheric. It feels real. Like I have been to Beijing, and it is impossible for me to understand how I was there and did not see the dragons, because they must have been there and I just missed them.
Yes.
Oh, that sounds so lovely. Thank you for both of those recommendations. I'm pasting links into the chat just so folks can follow up on them if they like, but and we'll send it out with the show notes as well.
And we really appreciate you. You're both amazing, and I learned a lot, and thank you for your patience with me, of course. Talking to our audience for a second, I want to, before we do the wrap up and all of that, we have gone through kind of a weird graph this year where we, for example, suddenly, because of my cybersecurity background and some of the other people on the show, we brought in the person at the NSA and DHS and some of the experts and some of the activists all around election security. And we have done shows on AI and ethics, and we've kind of strayed slightly off of science fiction. We like it. We decided to go a little bit with our passions. We hope you were happy with us. We think, according to the surveys, you were. But I want to make sure and kind of talk to you for a minute. And we have started with this journey of the Hugos. We intend to continue. And I will actually load up my list of what I need to say now. Wrap up and thanks. Thank you. I did that. Now, we are on www.essenceofwonder.com if you want to subscribe to see more content. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. If you want to follow us directly with the streams, go to the channel of your choice. And we'll have a series of shows with the finalists and about the awards. But our next show is actually discussing the Apple TV show For All Mankind. And we're going to have special guests. One of them is author R.W.W. Green. We're going to have Alex Fayette, who is a friend and was on the board of both Karen's and mine startup companies. And he loved the show as well. And we're going to have Helen Montgomery, who is an amazing person on her own, and the chair of the World Cup next year in Chicago. And we will just geek out about it because I have so much to say about this show. I don't even know where to start. Maybe I should have asked Mary Robinette about it, but I'm not sure. That would have been a rude question, a good question. I'm not sure, but okay. And that will happen on the 10th of July. This was Essence of Wonder. We hope you have an excellent week, and we'll see you soon.